So thank you for coming. I think I should start by telling you where I'm talking from, why I'm interested in this case. I think that the first reason is that I have been a judge and an investigator myself for some 25 years. I was first a prosecutor, and then I was an investigating magistrate. And I have carried out, probably successfully, one of the most important financial investigations ever done in Europe. That was the ELF case that I carried out from 1994 till I ended it in 2002, and people were convicted in 2003. So this means that I am a practitioner. I know how international cooperation works and how it don't work from inside. I have been working with it for years, and I've been fighting with it. And I decided in 2002 to try to change the world from Norway. I worked with the Norwegian government for 8 years on development issues and on anti-corruption issues, and also to improve the legal cooperation. And then I became an MP, a European member of the European Parliament, in 2009, and that I did to continue to fight corruption, money laundering, and to improve the legal cooperation. I'm heading in the European Parliament the Committee on Development, Human Aid. I'm heading the Committee on Support for Democracy, and I'm involved in the reflection on the creation of a special prosecutor in Europe, meaning that I am engaged in this issue since more than 30 years. And so this is my background. And why Julian Assange? One of the reasons is that I was impressed when WikiLeaks started up in 2006 by what they published, what that learned us about the world we're living in, and also because of the hazards of the life. When I was conducting the investigation into the bank crisis on Iceland in 2009 to 2011, I met with Julian Assange, who was in Iceland in 2010. I think it was spring 2010. And at that time it was very special atmosphere in Iceland because of the crisis they had been through, their wake-up, their democratic wake-up. How was it that the bankers could have conducted them bankruptcy and that nobody has seen anything? And you remember there were new elections and a will to change a lot of things. And Julian Assange came up with the idea that we could make Iceland a safe haven for information, because as journalists you know that you cannot publish everything, that you are exposed to libel, and if you are a UK journalist you are also exposed to injunctions and to secret injunctions not to talk about certain subjects. And this idea got a huge echo in Iceland. It was called the Modern Media Initiative, to make Ireland a place that is the contrary of a Cat7, a paradise for information. And this project is still ongoing. And at that time, I accepted to endorse this project. And Jon, who is with me, was on the board of this project. So this is how I met with Assange the first time. And then in 2010, that was the same year, when I read about the Swedish story, I was shocked, and how to say that I trusted that the Swedish legal system, which is very robust and who has long democratic traditions, that they would find ways forward and that they would be able to to conduct this case within a reasonable time. And I went to see Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy a year ago just to have his news. And I saw how he lived, locked up in an embassy, small place to live on, and I was then worried about his situation, and I started digging much more into it. And I thought something must happen this year, and nothing happens. And I went back to meet with him 1 month ago, and I found then that his appearance and his health situation had degraded, I can say, I think, from the year before. And then I decided that something must be done, that we cannot go on with this situation that is locked. The arrest order sent out by the Swedish prosecution authorities, it is 3.5 years ago. And so I think what is important today is to have kind of new look on it. To see that we have a situation where we have legitimate interests on both sides. We have the situation of the victims that must be taken care of. And I do not have an opinion on the responsibilities of guilt, who is guilty, who is not guilty. That is not my purpose. What I want to see is that we must find a solution, and I think I know the solution. The arrest order is 3.5 years old. And everything goes on, like the Swedish prosecution service do not take seriously that Ecuador has granted asylum, and that this asylum means that Ecuador thought that the danger that Julian Assange alleged as to the threat he faces from an extradition from the US are real. That is what it means. And if you read the newspapers and gather all the information, there are tons of information that there are ongoing investigations in the US into WikiLeaks, the founders of WikiLeaks, and into Julian Assange himself, and that they try to have him judged for accomplice of terrorism and espionage, spying, rather than being a publisher of what other people are sending to his platform. And this is a threat, we can talk about that later, this is a threat to all the journalists in the world. If you are in possession of documents by a source that has public interest, you could be called an accomplice of terrorism, and I think this is not the word that we want. But so this situation was judged by Ecuador sufficiently serious to grant him asylum. So this I cannot see why Julian Assange should give up his human rights to ask for asylum in order to answer questions by the Swedish prosecutors here in Sweden, and that we do not know what the prosecutor will do with the case, and to take the risk of having an extradition order then coming to Sweden. And when I see that the prosecutor says, we know that he cannot be extradited, I think they are talking about what they do not know. It's none of their business. The prosecution don't have a word to say about the extradition. This is for the government to decide, and then for the courts, but it's not for the prosecutor at this stage. And so I think that here there are some misunderstandings. So we've taken into account that Julian Assange has the human right to ask for asylum, and this is a serious decision that the Swedish prosecution cannot just say, well, I do not care about this, he should come here. And we have the victims' right, their human rights, to have their case tried, because they also need to move on with their lives. They have been waiting for 4 years. And then, in our common toolbox in Europe, we have tools that do allow for international cooperation. It's not a big deal. In the Elf case, I went abroad to interrogate suspects that had fled France, that didn't want to come back. And I managed to interrogate them in Israel, for instance. We had no convention, but we made an ad hoc agreement with the authorities, and this was done. We had the convention from 1959 of European cooperation, and now we have a much better convention that is from 2000, that entered into force in 2005, and who has modernized and made much more efficient the international cooperation. And I can say that UK was known for not cooperating easily, but that has changed also. Today, this cooperation is much easier. And I can tell that because I didn't stop doing investigative work in 2002, because I conducted, set up, and I helped the Icelandic investigation into their banksters. And you know, today, these are the only country in the world that are putting their bankers to court and obtaining convictions. And we used this new European convention, and we obtained cooperation from Luxembourg, which had a very bad record in legal international cooperation. And the most important house searches made in Luxembourg were made on request from Iceland. So these new tools are working. So why shouldn't the Swedish prosecutor use the tools that are in the toolbook? This is not a special treatment for Julian Assange. This is for anybody who is abroad and who refuses to come back. If you don't use the arrest order, that is the bakusa, you can use the cooperation to get this information. And then, if we did that, then maybe later on it will be needed to make confrontations with the victims, other witnesses. And I would say that this could be done by video conference, even if it's not foreseen in the law book. This is done at the International Court of Justice when the witnesses are in danger. This is done on a daily basis in all the courts in Europe. And I did it in my important cases in the 90s. It was not foreseen in the law book, but I did it in a creative way, making sure who the witness was, the date, and the Supreme Court accepted it. Today it is in the law book. Things are not today like they used to be yesterday, and we cannot live only saying, I can't do anything that I didn't do yesterday. I mean, you have to live with the modern tools that you have, and if Swedish law do not foresee it, that should be changed. Maybe that could be changed in an urgent way. Or churches can just do it and see what happens. I mean, the Supreme Court could allow that. And then, when the preliminary work is finished, interrogatories, confrontations, then the decision can be taken. Either there is a case to answer or it's not a case to answer. Let's take the option where there is a case to answer. Then the Swedish Prosecution Service can send it to the Swedish courts, and Swedish law do not foresee in absentia judgments. But this we didn't do in France either for serious crime. But when we judged our former president, Mr. Chirac, he said, I'm too tired to come. But I want the court case to move on, and I do accept to be judged in a contradictory way with my lawyers being present, and I have told you everything I know. And so was done, in spite of the fact that in the law book it was said that he should be present. And then we must remember why this rule exists. It exists because of the protection of the suspect, to ensure the contradictory of the process. And I do pretend that if the lawyers of Assange are present in the courtroom, and Julian Assange himself by a link, by Skype or video conference, this could be a good process. And we would take care of all the interests of the interested parties, not sacrificing Julian Assange's right to have asylum for the right of the victims to have their case tried. And if this solution do not agree, the Swedish prosecutors, they could use some other tool in the toolbox that we have made, because it's useful and that I have used myself, that is delegation of the public action. They could send their files to Ecuador and ask the Ecuadorian justice to take the case. So I think, this is a way...
Excuse me, just to clarify that, the case could be tried in Ecuadorian courts.
Can be.
Yeah.
And then I have one more element, and then I will stop talking and leave the floor to you. We also have agreements for serving the sentence. If he was judged in Sweden and he was convicted to imprisonment, he can serve his sentence elsewhere. All this is possible. And I think, I have seen from the debate here in Sweden that most people did not believe in the reality of the danger that Assange was exposed to. I think that it's paramount today that there is a debate in Swedish society, because the world has really changed with Snowden. With what Snowden tells about the general surveillance of all of us, and also more specifically about Assange. He said, and I'm sure you know this TV interview, he said on German television that Assange is on a manhunter list. And you might remember that eminent members of the Senate has asked for Assange to be tried for spying for terrorism. I'm thinking about Dianne Feinstein, who said that. And this is not nobody. She's a very important member of the American Senate, and I do recommend you to read her speech held in the Senate some 2 weeks ago, where she told the world, and also Swedish journalists, that the CIA and the American agencies are not playing by the rules, and that they have gone into the computers in the Senate, and that they have suppressed some 4,000 pages telling about the CIA not respecting the rules. And I think we have difficulties in understanding how much the world has changed with all the information that we got from Assange and from Snowden. And I think it is an urgency that this situation, that it is a bleeding wound, and I think it's not good for anybody, and that there are means that we can solve it, taking into account the interest of all the parties. Thank you.
You tell us about your attempts to discuss this with the relevant Swedish officials, especially the prosecutor in charge and the chief prosecutor.
That is very easy to tell. I have asked to meet with the Minister of Justice, with the Chief Prosecutor, and with Marianne Nee, and nobody wants to meet with me. And I'm wondering why. I'm an honorable person.
Have you encountered that sort of, what shall I say, blasé reaction anywhere else? Is this unusual or usual?
Normally, when a member of the European Parliament, head of a committee, taking care of so 59 billion euros a year, asks for an appointment, I'm getting it.
Mm-hmm. Do you draw any conclusions from this?
That this is a very difficult question, and in a way that I'm here in my own quality. Nobody's paying me. I'm using my own time, and I hope European money. This is a European issue. It's an European issue. It shows that we need better cooperation. If we cannot solve this problem between England and Sweden, how do we think that we can solve problems with, I don't know, with Afghanistan or Turkey or a lot of other countries? I also forgot to tell you that I'm working in Afghanistan, that I am not at all an anti-militarist person. I went to military school. I did the Institute of Superior Military Studies in France. And I'm working in Afghanistan as an anti-corruption person. I was appointed by the UN, and I'm working very closely with Americans who risk their lives, and I have sensitivity to all these questions.
How would you describe your personal relation to Mr. Assange? Are you a personal friend?
It was inexistent until I told you this is totally transparent. I want to be totally transparent. I met with him the first time in Iceland, and I felt that we had common views on how damageable the secrecy is to the world. Because I spent my life fighting against tax havens, seeing how criminal many banks are, how they are stealing, how they are allowing themselves to take a huge percentage of produce value every year. This was my part. And I also met, because I know journalists, because I followed cases in Africa, for instance, the Trafigura case with what was the name of the boat, Provokuala, I think, which went to Ivory Coast and spread a lot of toxic waste there. I followed it because I was interested. And all of a sudden, the Guardian stopped talking about it. And then they went to the British Parliament to ask a question, because you have immunity in the House of Commons. And they had a question asked by a parliamentarian about Trafigura. And then we learned that there was a secret injunction for all the press to talk about this case. So I was very sensitive to the idea of making Iceland safe haven for information. So he was sympathetic to me. And then when I learned about this story here in Sweden, I was, as everybody else, shocked. And I wanted this to be investigated. And I hoped at the bottom of my heart that he would be clear, but I was not sure. You cannot be sure. So what I'm saying is that this case should come to an end.
But you will not describe yourself as a friend, or a personal friend of his?
No, I'm not. I'm not. I mean, there is a generational problem. I know that I'm looking very young and beautiful, but I'm 70 years old and he is 40, I think, so.
Still be friends.
Are you in any way optimistic that the Swedish investigators will change their mind?
What I'm optimistic about, I think that you will understand, and that you will write articles that will make the public opinion understand that this is not a Swedish issue. It is an international issue.
But you know that the prosecutors have already disregarded the idea of a video link. The question has been up before.
Yes, but you know, I think that I do not like situations where the will of one person can stop the whole process. I liked when there are appeals, and I think there is not such a thing as this is what I want to do and this is how it shall be. This is not democratic.
You're referring to Marianne Lee now?
Yes, well, she had the right to conduct the case the way she wanted for 4 years. It has went nowhere.
She also has a responsibility to contribute to a solution. You know, if her current policy is not working and the case is not moving forward, she has an obligation, you know, because, you know, again, it's a human rights issue that everybody involved in the case has a right to a satisfactory conclusion to the case, and it's not just Assange, but it's also the two girls.
That is Article 9 of the European Convention on Human Rights.
I mean, you know, repeating the same solution and expecting different results is
what I do expect
not working.
Is that the head of the Swedish prosecution should take the case himself.
Have you discussed this at all with Assange's Swedish lawyers? Or?
No, I haven't met a Swedish lawyer.
Do you
I'm
plan
not
to do so?
Assange's lawyer. I'm talking from my own platform with my 30 years of experience in this business and seen from many angles. I could have met with his lawyers. They will give you their version. I'm giving you the version of a member of the European Parliament that is sensitive to human rights. If you look me up, you will find that I'm also defending Basma Belaid, the widow of Mr. Belaid, who was killed in Tunisia. In the same way, talking talking the importance of getting the case to court. Maybe one day I will become a lawyer, but that is not. I'm still a parliamentarian, and I'm running for a second term because I want the issue of a European prosecutor to move forward.
How would this new prosecutor touch upon this case? What would be the relevance in a case like this, for example?
What would a European prosecutor do with this?
Yeah.
In the first stage, and we will use 5 years to get there, the European prosecutor would only have the power to take care of the economic interests of the Union. So this would not be his case. I think in a second time, we should have a prosecutor that can take care of transnational criminality and prosecution. But I think it's still very far away when we will have a unique prosecutor.
You may already discussed this when I was out, but at the risk of repeating that, point out 2 things. First of all, it's not yet established that the 2 women are victims, so it's probably not good to call them victims, alleged victims.
Alleged victims,
or
right.
complainants or something.
Because we have the presumption of innocence,
No?
meaning that Julian Assange is innocent until he's convicted.
The other
And
thing,
when?
the other thing is that a Supreme Court judge in Sweden, what is his name? Will come to me, has himself said that there is no impediment to prosecute any traveling to London to meet. So there's no legal impediment apparently.
No.
To this,
So
even under Swedish law.
I know that, and that's what I wanted to come and say with strength from a practical point of view. And I think that it is not acceptable for the interest here and also for the reputation of Sweden that a case can be stopped on prestige. There should be ways to go forward. And if they do not exist, the law should be amended.
As far as I know, it's not clear what the general public thinks about all this. I don't know of any systematic opinion polls. Does anyone here? We know what appears in the press, and the press has been very skewed, at least in the articles and commentaries.
I think it's important to get the facts on the table.
Yeah.
And, because the discussion, unless people are aware of what has happened, of the Times corresponding saying autumn 2013, I cannot wait to have to justify the drone attack that took the Julian Assange away. It's very violent.
One of the things that we've been trying to point out is that Julian Assange and WikiLeaks are a publishing organization. They haven't leaked anything. They have taken information leaked from other sources and published. And so for you guys as journalists, this is a really important question because it is about the criminalization of journalism. The way he has been treated and the WikiLeaks organization, and now people associated with Snowden and, Miranda, Glenn Greenwald's partner, who is apprehended at the airport in London, and his computers taken, and it's done under, with reference to the UK anti-terrorism legislation. So it's a very important distinction that WikiLeaks, and this is what the Americans are trying. Chelsea Manning's American lawyer said that he had the feeling that he had 2 defendants, and one was Manning, and the other one was Julian Assange, because they tried everything they could to draw him into Manning's case, and in the closing statements of the prosecution in the US, they mentioned Julian Assange's name 26 times, just in the closing statement. So what they are trying to do is to establish a conspiracy between WikiLeaks and
Well, that's the distinction
Snowden.
we're trying to make, is that WikiLeaks is not a passive recipient of leaks, but has incited them. Of persuasion.
Well,
That is what they want to.
is that proven?
No, that's what they're trying to prove.
Yeah. I get it.
So, are there any more questions? Unless we will take time for individual interviews.
Your suggestion, has that been, have you discussed that with the Ecuadorian authorities then?
I think that was, in a way, premature. I mean, we needed first to obtain from the Swedish prosecution authorities that they are willing to go there, and then maybe because the Ecuador have given asylum, I think we can anticipate that they will not oppose. But we are in British territory, so we need the cooperation from the UK. That is what we needed first, and also the cooperation of the Ecuador authorities.
What do the British say then?
Well, you have to ask them. They have duty to cooperate this regard, as to the convention I refer to.
They claim that they are compelled to act on behalf of the Swedish government.
That they are?
Compelled to act on behalf of the Swedish authorities.
Yes,
That
they
they're
are.
not really doing it themselves, but that they are only doing what
They are
they're
spending,
required to do.
I think, $4 million
Yeah, or
of
more.
pounds
Yeah.
a year to guard the issue of the embassy.
Yeah.
So this is also absurd, isn't it? It's absurd use of money, the time that goes by